Good morning, everyone. Sorry it took me a little longer to get online this morning. It was my computer seems to be getting old and it wants to go slow. It probably needs to be just reset to factory settings and it'll be fine. But anyway, here we are. Good morning, Art. Uh, I hope you're feeling better. Hi, Kathy. Nice to see you again. Um, Let me see. I'm going to get the link for joining us online here in case you or someone else wants to do that. That would be great because it gets a little bit long when it's it's only me. And but anyway, if you would like to join us on the panel here, um, then this is the link. And you'll need a password, which I will get for you anon. And the password is here. There you go. Okay. So if anyone would like to join in the live stream with me, that helps me because I need somebody to converse with. It helps me have somebody to converse with so it feels like I'm doing a real thing and not just talking to a camera here. Um, and if not, just hang in there and we will get with this. All right, so we are, geez, in the middle of a paragraph we stopped last week. But so let me start the paragraph over. Oh no, it's not the middle of the paragraph. Good. Okay, so here we go. Jung's suffering. Okay, so we're reading from Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions. And this essay is by Maria Guerra. I read Maria's curriculum vitae last week, so I'm not going to reread that today. And let me see if I can get my background going. My mother-in-law's bedroom is not necessarily the prettiest place. There we go. Okay. So Jung's suffering demonstrates that his transgression of the existing morals, without which individuation would not be possible, wasn't inconsequential, but part of a deep process of elaboration. To live through a conflict of such dimensions and to endure the consequences contributes to strengthening and developing one's personality. Jung not only lived this, but also developed from personal experiences a consistent and profound theoretical framework. The transcendent function, described by Jung in 1916, 110 years ago, demonstrates the capacity of the psyche to produce a unifying symbol when a conflict is lived to its fullest. This process metaphorically expresses the alterity archetype. Work through the opposites until a third alternative emerges. Okay. So we can talk about that a little bit at some point here. When my prince had, I'm going to quote him now. When my prince had fallen, the spirit of the depths opened my vision and let me become aware of the birth of the new God. The divine child approached me out of the terrible ambiguity, the hateful beautiful, the evil good, the laughable serious, the sick healthy, the inhuman human, and the ungodly godly. I understood that the God whom we seek in the absolute was not to be found in absolute beauty, goodness, seriousness, elevation, humanity, or even in godliness. Once the God was there, I understood that the new God would be in the relative. Unquote. The experience is based on the alterity archetype are much richer, but much more difficult to be lived than those based in the patriarchal archetype. This latter, because it establishes clear rules, enables predictions to be made and to determine what is right and wrong, and what can or cannot, should or should not be done. But on the other hand, it is much more restrictive since the rules are generally the same for everyone, and what is or is not allowed belongs to the collective consensus. The ease with which the ease with which the patriarchal archetype can be exercised occurs to the detriment of what is more valuable, the possibility of going our own way and making our own choices from our deepest truth. The path guided by the alterity archetype enables us to acknowledge and respect our own truth, even if it goes against the prevailing rules and morals. In the words of Jung, quote, thus, vice too, if entered into sincerely as a means of finding and expressing the self, is not vice, but the fearless honesty cuts that out. But when we are bound by an artificial barrier or by laws and moralities that have entered into us, then we are prevented from finding or even from seeing that there is a real barrier of the self outside this artificial barrier. If we are conscious morality, morality no longer exists. If we are not conscious, we are still slaves, and we are accursed if we obey not the law. Okay, everybody got that one? So you can disobey the law, but you have to take the consequences, basically. Okay. The alterity archetype does not have a unique and universal answer to face challenging and daring experiences, but it demands courage to be followed. This archetype challenges us to integrate the polarities and is also the basis of many of Jung's experiences described in the Red Book. For example, when he tries to integrate the spirit of this time and the spirit of the depths, when, like Christ, he bears the suffering as a path to transformation. When he sees in Philemon the one who loves, the representation of wisdom. When he writes the Ode to Faunus, there are so many images in the Red Book that express the struggle between the polarities in the search for integration that we could consider the Red Book to be a book of paradoxes. Okay, going on. This is a quote. Quote, "The spirit of the depths took my understanding and all my knowledge and placed them at the service of the inexplicable and the paradoxical. He robbed me of speech and writing for everything that was not in his service, namely the melting together of sense and nonsense, which produces the supreme meaning." Unquote. Jung also wrote about ambiguity, but ambiguity is the way of life. You say the Christian God is unequivocal, he is love, but what is more ambiguous than love? Love is the way of life, but your love is only on the way of life, is only on the way of life if you have a left and a right. Nothing is easier than to play at ambiguity, and nothing is more difficult than living ambiguity. Okay. Oh boy, it's been a busy week. Yesterday we had National History Day, and I was dragooned into being a judge for our county contest. And it was interesting. It was interesting to see um, pretty well um, balanced young people make an effort at creating their own documentary. That was good and interesting. Um, but some of them were a little bit too cavalier. One girl didn't bother to comb her hair when she appeared on screen. And I don't bother to hide my t-shirt sometimes, it seems. Yeah, let's see if that helps. There, okay. Um, and hello, Archiphanes. Okay, so where am I? In fact, ambiguity is difficult to accept because the ego wants a life without paradox, a bidimensional life, unilateral, adapted, often mediocre, contrary to life driven by the search for individuation. The individuation process longed for, theorized, and lived by Jung in his experience and revealed in the Red Book, does not accept concessions, does not give doesn't give it in to the desire to adapt to the status quo, and his ambiguity was experienced in love. Carlos Byington, this is a Brazilian Jungian analyst who's still active. Carlos Byington emphasizes the importance of symbols to structure consciousness, thus calling them structuring symbols. He refers to that which activates and drives symbols as their structuring function, since it operates together with the symbol in the structuring of consciousness. All or practically all structuring functions, all or practically all structuring functions can be lived in the different patterns of consciousness. Furthermore, it is important to remember that all experiences can lead to consciousness if elaborated and accepted as developing. as developing and strengthening the personality, or they can sorry, I am hypnotizing myself, so that is not a good sign. I get very sleepy when nobody's talking to me. So feel free to join me. Um, so Demon Girl, Angel Boy 666. Okay, I've put in the YouTube link the link and password to join me here on stage, but only do that if you're willing to have your visage appear here. Don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Okay, let me go back to Carlos. Carlos Byington emphasizes the importance of symbols to structure consciousness, thus calling them structuring symbols. He refers to that which activates the drives symbols as their structuring function, since it operates together with the symbol in the structuring of consciousness. All, or practically all, structuring functions can be lived in the different patterns of consciousness. Furthermore, it is important to remember that all experiences can lead to consciousness if elaborated and accepted as developed and strengthened, strength and strengthening the personality, or they become a fixation and create the shadow. Based on these concepts, it is important to stress that the structuring functions of boldness and transgression, uh, frequent in individuals who go beyond the rules established by the collective in the search for consciousness consciousness of alterity, uh, do not guarantee experiencing this pattern of consciousness, or that is being experienced in a healthy way. For this is for this to occur, these functions have to be accompanied by the structuring function of ethics. We propose, as proposed by Neumann, incalculable, um, in his book Depth Psychology and the New Image. Sorry. Um, yeah, it would be great if somebody would look on with me. I just knocked out for a minute, but I'm back. Jung welcomed anguish, fear, and suffering and faced what he considered to be as terrible as Christ's passion. No one knows what happened during the 3 days Christ was in hell. I have experienced it and bore everything in the name of the truth of the heart, the soul, the anima, and the spirit of the depths. Thus, when pointing to the future, Jung brings us fundamental elements, even for the survival of our species, the importance of developing consciousness and the individuation process of each of us, the extent to which this process is associated with the ability to symbolize the importance given to love and eros as a function of relationship, and all this rooted in the alterity archetype. Uh, these aspects these aspects point to an extremely new and even revolutionary dimension In other words, if we are able to love and treat others as we treat ourselves, and also bear our suffering and permit it to lead us toward the path of self-knowledge and to a deep understanding of our being, while never forgetting that everyone has the same right to life, the future of humanity seems more possible. Okay. Now I am to the section called conclusion in this essay, which is a page and a half, but I'm going to take a break for a minute. And if there are any comments about this last part of this essay, please bring them now. So, Sheree, it's not difficult to log on here. Above your chat here, there's a link that I put in. You click on that link, it challenges you and asks for a password. The password is the number. And once you do that, you'll be here with me. And I would love to have you or anyone else join me to keep me talking. Um, Oh, yeah, the link gives you the opportunity to agree to being recorded. Also, you can click on the video button to see how you appear before you choose to enter the room. Okay, that's fair enough. It's early on a Sunday morning. Some people haven't combed their hair, and the the kids that I judged yesterday on their documentaries. Um, One of the girls didn't bother to comb her hair. It's, what is this person thinking? I at least combed my hair. I at least did shave this morning. And I've already made one trip up to my apartment with my computer against the possibility that we will have a snowstorm tonight and I will have to um, work from home tomorrow. Um, yeah, thank you, Kathy. That's helpful. Um, okay, I'm going to give the conclusion. So I'm in Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, Volume 4, and we're at the conclusion of an essay called Jung's Red Book as a Healing Symbol for Our Time. So let me talk about symbols for a moment. When there's a conflict in your mind about anything, um, it's normally resolved by some symbol. And the symbol comes to mind, and you can either recognize it as a symbol or not. If you don't recognize it as a symbol, then you don't recognize it as a solution to the problem, to the duality of the problem. But if you do recognize it as a symbol, you can integrate that. It becomes part of your life. And so, for example, we have crosses all over the United States. And I know in places like Korea, you can see a cross almost on every street corner because there are a lot of good Christians in Korea. And the cross is a universal symbol of Christianity, but also a universal symbol of the dualities of left and right and above and below. And if you know that, then you already know what the answer is. What's the symbol of bringing together left and right? What's the significance of it? Well, only you know for sure, because it's the symbol for you to integrate into your life. So anyway, all right. Going to the conclusion. Living in paradox is one of the aspects that makes it difficult to maintain consciousness within the pattern of alterity. In the West, the acceptance of the alterity archetype was made possible through the Christian myth. But more than 2,000 years later, it is still very difficult for humanity to acknowledge that every human being has the same right to exist. Someone from another race, another religion, another gender, or even another species, whether animal or vegetable, planet Earth urgently needs us to elaborate the alterity archetype, and this is why I consider it important to acknowledge Jung as a symbol of someone who sought to live under the aegis of this archetype, searching to develop his consciousness and reflecting on the struggle in his work. Okay, very good. Okay, sorry. Um, I'm just going to close my eyes for a minute and then look. Richard says, have you tried playing a little music low in the background? Senses will be activated. It's not a bad idea, Richard, except I have such tinnitus in my ears that it gets rather confusing in there. Okay, Kathy, um, you say that's shallow of you to say that a second time, Skip. I don't know what I'm repeating. I often repeat myself, I think, but you should have judged and comment only on the content of her documentary. Um, and Richard says archetypal symbols are alive and they affect people around you. They're expressed in our breath. Yes, they are. But Sherry says, please be patient with me. My apologies. Richard, I have no devices to participate with Kathy in watching on a 7-year-old Android type phone held together with painter's tape. Okay, understood. We all have our own limitations. So, all right, let me see if I can get back into this. Okay, so Jung was recognizing the struggle between the conscious and the unconscious on many different planes, so many different slices. And if our hypothetical patients recognize that, like Jung at the beginning of the Red Book, they would also they had also lost their soul and could experience this book as a symbol of healing. They would learn to dedicate time to self-knowledge and to connecting with the rhythm of their nature. They could realize this book is a calling to introversion and could learn a few techniques with it: active imagination, paintings, observation, observation of and writing down of dreams, amplifications, which would help with their journey and would point toward an equilibrium between extroversion and introversion, between outer and inner world. Okay, so that's what we're trying to achieve is an outer and an inner world that can get along with one another. Ah, okay. All right. So, reading on, um, they would find in the Red Book ethical support to face their own shadow. They would learn that sacrifice is not destruction and would find the courage to bear frustration and endure conflict until a unifying symbol emerges, activating their transcendent function, which would help them integrate contents of their shadow to consciousness. This process would help them in the search for a greater purpose in life, the supreme meaning, facilitating a conscious connection with the self. The psychic image of the deity, which could possibly replace unbridled and psychologically. Oh my God. Life would thus stop being meaningless and would become rich and full, typical of those who lead a symbolic life. The feeling function would be considered important and equated with the thinking function, and love and respect for others would replace narcissistic, selfish desires. Thanks to his intelligence, dedication, honesty, seriousness, sensibility, and especially to his search for truth and to his scientific spirit, Jung did not confine his experiences to something that referred only to himself or to those uh, from his own schools. And sorry, my my psyche, my unconscious is taking over and causing me to dream and make my own symbol. I don't know if that will come through or not during this period. Life would thus stop being meaningless and would become rich and full, typical of those who lead a symbolic life. The feeling function would be considered important and equated with the thinking function, and the love and respect for others would replace narcissistic and selfish desires. Okay, so I can say something about this, I think. Um, when I served on active duty in the Marine Corps, for me, it was quite meaningful. And when I wore the uniform, um, I became somebody else. Okay, I became a archetypal Marine Corps officer, And I recognized that very early on that this was happening to me. And, it was as easy as taking off or putting on my tunic, and my persona would just change. And um, I think most people who have followed this channel for the last decade would agree that I'm normally pretty warm and fuzzy in these sessions, but I can get serious. But I normally don't, and I don't put on a uniform or special clothes to come here. But in the Marines, if I put on my uniform for whatever activity we have, then I'm an archetypal warrior archetype. And uh, I recognized that long ago, even while I was on active duty. Um, okay, so, but if you have no comment, so anyway, as a Marine officer, I'm living a symbolic life. I know that my uniform is a symbol for everything that ever passed in the history of the U.S. Marine Corps. And I don't have to say anything about it for it to do that. And so that's part of living a symbolic life. When I'm wearing my uniform, I am a Marine, and um, I guess I assume certain of the archetypal features of a Marine. Okay. The feeling function would be considered important and equated with the thinking function, and the love and respect for others would replace narcissistic and selfish desires. So if you can um, imagine a Marine officer in the field, and suddenly he has um, a prisoner who's a woman and a prisoner that has um, children with her. And you have to you have to exercise your feeling function to find the female member of your platoon who can deal with this woman in her own customary way, which is what a lot of them do when they're in the field. Um, you know, as General Al Gray used to say, all Marines are riflemen, and all Marines are in the infantry first. This is true. Uh, and those women Marines would not hesitate to pick up a rifle and blow your head off if they felt they needed to. But at the same time, they can be very helpful to a unit that's dealing with a lot of refugees, for example. Um, so Richard says, love is expressed through good life values, charity being the thing that wipes out many wrongs according to the Gospels. Well, I think that that's right. I think you, if you give people something, uh, they appreciate it, and they appreciate you as a result. Um, yeah, and so Kathy says, to me, Marine is an identity, and the archetype of you in uniform is top shelf authority. Yeah, I certainly assume authority when I put my uniform on. And if I'm walking around and I happen to run into a member of the armed forces, I will certainly salute any person that's my senior and expect a salute from anybody who is my junior based on their uniform. Okay. Um, Thanks to his intelligence, dedication, honesty, seriousness, sensibility, and especially to his search for truth and to his scientific spirit, Jung did not confine his experiences to something that referred only to himself or to those from his intimate circle, but tried to elaborate them in the light of depth psychology and as realities of the soul. In his search to integrate the personal with the collective, uh, connecting practical experience with theory, developing a synthesis between opposites and basing this integration on his own individuation process, Jung points to a new pattern of consciousness. His passionate nature, the exuberance of his imagination, and capacity to surrender to it, together with his search to integrate polarities and his vocation to develop his experiences theoretically, all suggest that he had an alterity consciousness with major. Try to begin that sentence again because again I'm just losing it on trying to read this. His passionate nature, the exuberance of his imagination, and his capacity to surrender to it, together with his search to integrate polarities and his vocation to develop his experiences theoretically, all this suggests that he had an alterity consciousness with matriarchal dominance. As such, he points to something still very new even today, above all with respect to men who are traditionally associated with the patriarchal function of consciousness. Hence, I consider him to be a symbol of what is to be. Hence, I consider him a symbol of what is to become, and his red book is a symbol of healing for our time. I certainly concur with that. Um, so there's an interesting footnote here. He says, I'm looking for a person who can love without punishing, imprisoning, and draining the other person. I am seeking this as yet unrealized type who who will uh, who will manage to separate love from social advantage or disadvantage. Sorry. So this footnote, I am looking for a person who can love without punishing, imprisoning and draining the other person. I am seeking this as yet unrealized type who will manage to separate love from social advantage or disadvantage, so that love may always be an end unto itself, not just a means for achieving not just a means for achieving another end. It is my misfortune that my life means nothing to me without the joy of Joyce, without the joy of love, of tempestuous, eternally changing love. I'm sorry, folks. I've been burning the candle at both ends for quite a while now, actually a decade, and sometimes it catches up with me, especially on a cloudy day, I guess. Um, yeah, Richard says mercy in all situations. God knows uh, our true intentions of the heart. Yeah, that seems to be true. Okay. There is a footnote here by Mr. Byington, but it is in Portuguese. And so my Portuguese was never up to speed. So I'm not sure I can uh, read it to you. Okay, next week, we're going to have a very interesting article by Thomas More. Thomas More is a gentleman who went to seminary to become a priest, and he decided not to be a priest and decided to become a Jungian analyst instead. And he's written several very provocative and very interesting books. So I look forward to reading his article. His article is called Jung's Red Book and the Tradition of Natural Magic. And so it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say. Um, but I think I have to at least stop reading from the Red Book for a time for a moment because it's just knocking me out. But maybe I can find something else here in a moment. Okay. So one thing I was reading this week is The Spirit in Man, Art, and Literature. It's volume 15 of the collected works of C.G. Jung. And I was I was interested and decided to go back and um, read Jung's paper on James Joyce and on Picasso. And there is a very amusing comment that he makes uh, about Joyce's Ulysses. He's talking about Ulysses. And I'll go back and read that because it's kind of amusing. It's a cover letter that he wrote to James Joyce after he finally got through Ulysses, because I'm sure he was having trouble conking out like I am conking out now. And so it says, James Joyce to James Joyce, Hotel Elite Zurich. Dear Sir, your Ulysses has prevented presented the world with such an upsetting psychological problem that repeatedly I have been at I have been called in a supposed author I have been called excuse me I have been called in as a supposed authority on psychological matters. Um, Ulysses proved to be an exceedingly hard nut, and it has forced my mind not only to most unusual efforts, but also to rather extravagant peregrinations, speaking from the standpoint of a scientist. Your book as a whole has given me no end of trouble, and I was brooding over it for about 3 years until I succeeded to put myself into it. But I must tell you that I'm profoundly grateful to yourself as well as to your gigantic opus because I learned a great deal from it. I shall remember I shall probably never be quite sure whether I did enjoy it because it meant too much of grinding of nerves and of gray matter. I also don't know whether you will enjoy what I have written about it, uh, about Ulysses, because I couldn't help telling the world how much I was bored, how I grumbled, how I cursed, and how I admired the 40 pages of nonstop run at the end of at the end is a string of veritable psychological peaches. I suppose the devil's grandmother knows so much about the real psychology of a woman. I didn't. And of course, he's referring to the soliloquy of Molly Bloom at the end of Ulysses, which is, if you don't know it, you can find several versions or several actresses who will uh, give you the soliloquy of Molly Bloom from Ulysses on YouTube, and they're really worth a stitch to listen to them. Um, and then he says, well, I just tried to recommend my little essay to you as an amusing attempt of a perfect stranger who went astray in the labyrinth of your Ulysses and happened to get out of it again by sheer good luck. At all events, you may gather from my article that Ulysses has done what Ulysses has done to a supposedly balanced psychologist. With expression of my deepest appreciation, I remain, dear sir, yours faithfully, Carl C.G. Jung. Um, so then there's a footnote. Jung's copy of Ulysses contains on its flyleaf the following inscription in Joyce's hand. To Dr. C.G. Jung, with grateful appreciation of his aid and counsel. James Joyce, Christmas 1934, Zurich. The copy is evidently the one that Jung owned when he wrote the essay, as some of the passages quoted therein have been marked in pencil. Okay, so that was one thing I wanted to bring to your attention. It's quite amusing in this book, and this is one of the, I think it's the thinnest of the collected works, so you can see it's quite a thin volume. And then the Picasso, um, the Picasso offers us a glimpse into how a mind faces and integrates something they don't understand. And um, in this case, I believe it was in 2012 that Jung attended the so-called Armory show in New York City. He was traveling to the U.S. and he decided to go to this modern art show. And it was right at the beginning of modern art. And he really did not, he was not happy about his experience there. And took it, he took it as a psychiatrist or a psychologist might take it, but not really rocking what was going on. And so years later, he wrote this essay about Picasso, which you can read. But Picasso, he didn't like Picasso, and he was very critical. And and so I put two marginal notes at the end of it. I said, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play? And my other note is, if your tool is a hammer, every problem is a nail. And so I felt that Jung had highlighted a continuum where artists are between um, neurosis and schizophrenia. And as an artist, you fall somewhere in that scale. And I just didn't feel that that was a fair analysis because there has to also be at least one dimension where you're just not crazy and you aren't between a neurosis and schizophrenia. And so I was I was troubled by that. And so I think it's fair to say that yes, Jung was an artist himself. Yes, he did some abstractions, but I don't think he appreciated um, the significance of abstract art as a conduit for communicating with the unconscious. And because I think he was much too critical on it if um, if it was just plain upright. So I hope I was meaningful in that comment. Um, so Cherie says, I admire James Joyce's novels. I reread them at least one a year. Finnegan's Wake um, makes one laugh. Well, I'm glad it makes you laugh. Um, yeah, he's quite an extraordinary writer, of course, and he won a Nobel Prize for literature. I think he did anyway. And just because it's hard to read and hard to understand, I think a lot of people like to diss James Joyce, James Joyce's work. Um, that's all I have to say about this at the moment. Um, okay, I'm going to cut this session short today because we are at the end of this essay, and and so I don't want to get started on the other essay because I think it would not do it justice, especially in my current current status of physical consciousness, let's say, because I'm just falling asleep at the switch here, and I apologize for that. It doesn't always happen, but it does. It is happening to me today, and so I need to prepare for tomorrow when our school is going to decide whether we're going to just stay home and work on a snow day, and I think that's what's going to happen. Um, so Richard makes the comment: neurosis and schizophrenia are essential to be an artist. To me, it's how you perceive. Yeah, okay. I mean, I think there's more to it than that. I don't think that you're necessarily crazy just because you want to do abstract art or yeah, abstract art. And maybe that you're just brilliant. And so anyway, I'm not doing any of us very much good here this morning, and I realize that. And we have been here for an hour anyway, so I'm gonna call it quits today, and next week we'll read this article by Thomas More, which should be very good, and I'll try to get some sleep in the meantime.